In 1974, a 19-year-old heiress was dragged from her apartment at gunpoint. 59 days later, she robbed a bank. She pointed an M1 carbine at innocent civilians, screamed revolutionary slogans, and called her own family the Pig Hearsts. When the FBI finally arrested her 19 months later, she weighed 87 pounds. Her IQ had dropped 18 points. She listed her occupation as urban guerrilla. Her name was Patty Hearst. And the question that haunted investigators, psychiatrists, and the American public was simple. How do you turn a victim into a true believer? The answer is a psychological phenomenon so powerful that the FBI now deliberately tries to create it during hostage situations. Not to hurt hostages, to save them. It is called Stockholm Syndrome, and today I'm going to show you exactly how it works. Welcome to the interrogation files, where power, psychology, and control are decoded, and you learn what they do not want you to know. Here is what I'm going to break down for you. First, the original 1973 case that gave this phenomenon its name, and why the hostages kissed their captors goodbye. Second, the 4 psychological mechanisms that hijack the human brain under captivity. And third, how to recognize when these same dynamics are being used on you, because Stockholm Syndrome does not require a bank vault. By the end, you will understand why your brain can betray you and what you can do about it. Most people think Stockholm Syndrome is rare, some kind of bizarre outlier. The FBI says otherwise. Their data from over 1,200 hostage incidents shows 8% of victims develop positive feelings toward their captors. That is roughly 1 in 12. But here is what makes it tactically significant. Those are just the cases that get reported. The same psychological machinery operates in domestic abuse, human trafficking, cult recruitment, and coercive control relationships. The mechanism is identical, only the setting changes. What you're about to learn is not just about hostages. It is about the vulnerability built into every human brain. August 23, 1973, Stockholm, Sweden. A man named Jan Erik Olsson walks into the Credit Bank wearing a wig and blue-tinted sunglasses. He fires a submachine gun at the ceiling and shouts in a fake American accent, "The party has just begun." For the next 131 hours, Olsson and his accomplice Clark Olofsson held 4 bank employees hostage in the vault. What happened next changed psychology forever. By day 2, hostage Kristin Enmark called the Swedish Prime Minister directly. Her message stunned him. She said she fully trusted the robbers. She said they had been very nice. What scared her was not the criminals holding her at gunpoint. What scared her was the police. She believed law enforcement would get her killed. Small kindnesses became magnified beyond all reason. When Olsson draped his jacket over Enmark because she was cold, she felt genuine gratitude. When he threatened to shoot another hostage named Sven Safstrom in the leg, Safstrom later recalled thinking how kind it was that Olsson said it was just his leg he would shoot. Not his head, his leg. And Safstrom felt grateful for that. When police finally stormed the vault, the hostages demanded their captors be allowed to exit first. They formed a protective circle around the robbers. They embraced them. They kissed them. Kristin Enmark shouted to Olofsson, "Clark, I will see you again." None of them would testify against their captors in court. They raised money for their legal defense. Enmark later had a romantic relationship with Olofsson. Their families became friends. A Swedish criminologist named Niels Bejerot appeared on television shortly after and coined the term Stockholm Syndrome. There was one problem. He never actually spoke to any of the hostages. This detail would later fuel controversy about whether the syndrome was invented to discredit a woman who criticized the police response. But the phenomenon itself, whatever you call it, the phenomenon is real. So how does terror transform into attachment? There are 4 interlocking mechanisms. Each one hijacks a different part of your psychology. Together, they can rewrite your loyalties without your conscious awareness. Mechanism 1, cognitive dissonance. Your brain cannot tolerate contradictory beliefs existing at the same time. When you're held captive, you experience 2 incompatible thoughts. This person could kill me. And also, this person gave me food. The psychological tension is unbearable. So your brain does something remarkable. It rationalizes. It minimizes the threat. It generates self-blame. If I had not made him angry, he would not have hit me. This is not weakness. This is your brain trying to make sense of chaos. The result is that you start to see kindness where there's only calculated manipulation. Mechanism 2, trauma, bonding through intermittent reinforcement. This is the same psychology that makes gambling addictive. When kindness arrives unpredictably after periods of fear, each moment of relief floods your brain with dopamine. The captor becomes associated with that relief, not with the terror that preceded it. Your stress hormones impair the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking. Meanwhile, oxytocin, the bonding hormone, creates attachment even in dangerous situations. The neurochemistry literally resembles addiction. You become chemically dependent on your captor's approval. Mechanism 3, learned helplessness and infantilization. When you cannot eat, speak, or use the bathroom without permission, your brain regresses. You become dependent like a child. This is not metaphor. It is literal. The captor becomes your source of survival, your interpreter of reality, your only connection to whether you live or die. Dr. Frank Ochberg, the psychiatrist who formally defined the syndrome for law enforcement, identified 3 stages. First comes terror. You are certain you will die. Then comes infantilization, total dependence. Finally comes emotional connection. You develop positive feelings toward the only person who seems to control your fate. Mechanism 4, isolation from competing perspectives. Without outside voices, the captor becomes your only source of information about reality. There is no one to tell you this is not normal, no one to remind you what healthy relationships look like. The captor's worldview becomes the only worldview. This is why cult leaders isolate members, why abusers separate victims from friends and family, why hostage takers refuse outside communication. Isolation is not incidental. It is essential. The FBI identified the conditions necessary for Stockholm Syndrome to develop: perceived threat to survival, small acts of kindness from the captor, isolation from outside perspectives, perceived inability to escape. When all 4 conditions are present, the bonding process can begin within 72 hours. Let me show you how this plays out in the most documented case in American history. June 10, 1991, South Lake Tahoe, California. An 11-year-old girl named J.C. Dugard is walking to her school bus stop. A gray sedan pulls up. A man shocks her with a stun gun. She hears him laugh and say, "I cannot believe we got away with it." She would not see her family again for 18 years. Philip Garrido kept Dugard in a concealed compound of tents and sheds behind his Antioch home. She was given a new name, Alyssa. She was forbidden from mentioning her past. She gave birth to 2 daughters at ages 14 and 17, delivering both alone in the backyard with no medical care. Here is where Stockholm Syndrome becomes visible. Over time, Dugard began helping with Garrido's printing business. She answered phones. She met clients. When authorities finally identified her in August 2009, she initially lied about who she was. When Garrido was about to be arrested, she told authorities he was a changed man. She said he was good with her kids. Dugard has since rejected the Stockholm Syndrome label. She called it degrading. She said she adapted to survive her circumstances. And this points to the controversy at the heart of the diagnosis. Some researchers argue Stockholm Syndrome pathologizes rational survival behavior. When fighting and fleeing are impossible, appeasement is what remains. It is not a syndrome, it is evolution. But here is what matters for you. Whether you call it Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding, or appeasement, the mechanism operates the same way. Threat plus isolation plus intermittent kindness plus time equals psychological capture. The same patterns appear in domestic violence, in human trafficking, in cult recruitment, in coercive workplace dynamics. The settings change, the psychology does not. So how do you recognize it? First, notice if you are defending someone who harms you to others. If you find yourself explaining away abuse, rationalizing threats, telling people they do not understand. Second, examine whether you feel responsible for your abuser's behavior. If you believe you caused their anger or could prevent it by being better, that is a warning sign. Third, ask yourself if you have negative feelings toward people trying to help you. If rescuers seem like threats and captors seem like protectors, your perception has been inverted. Fourth, consider whether you are isolated from outside perspectives. If your only source of information about reality is the person who controls you, you are in danger. Recovery requires physical separation first. You cannot think clearly while still in the environment that distorted your thinking. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps challenge the distorted thought patterns. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, helps process traumatic memories. Treatment reports 65 to 80% improvement rates. But the first step is always the same: distance. The FBI uses this knowledge tactically. Their crisis negotiators deliberately humanize hostages to captors. They ask about hostages by name. They request phone conversations. They discuss hostages' families. Why? Because the same bonding mechanism that traps victims can protect them. A captor who bonds with hostages finds it psychologically harder to kill them. Thomas Strentz, who designed the FBI's hostage negotiator program, explained, "A hostile hostage is a price law enforcement must pay for a living hostage. They would rather have a victim who defends their captor than a corpse who resisted." Jan Erik Olsen, the original Stockholm bank robber, admitted years later, "They made it hard to kill. I could have easily killed them in the beginning." But over time, it became more difficult as I developed an emotional bond. This is the brutal calculus of survival. Your brain will betray your logic to keep your body alive, and it will do this without asking your permission. The most dangerous manipulation is not the one that threatens you. It is the one that makes you grateful. That is the inversion Stockholm Syndrome teaches. When someone controls your survival and occasionally shows mercy, your brain will rewrite them as a protector. Not because you are weak, because that is how humans are built. Now you understand the mechanism. The question is, have you already been inside it without knowing? If this changed how you see relationships, hit subscribe. Every manipulation follows a playbook. I will decode them all.